99b, Tzadik Beis, Omid Beis. So it's the last line, just before the lines get widest, on 99b into the Testament Beis, and the word is the Asan. So what we are is that the Gemara is on the topic of giving proper respect to Torah, because it began with the issue of one who denigrates Torah, both whether in not believing in it properly or believing in it but mistreating it, loses their share in the world to come, as we described. So the Gemara raised an example of someone like this, who the verse refers to as high-handed, biyad rama. Tas biyad rama. As Menashe ben Chizkiah. Menashe son of Chizkiah, as we said, is the king in the southern kingdom of Israel, who overall the southern kingdom was in line with serving God, and this king tried to dissuade the people. And he would make fun of Torah by stating that there are certain parts of Torah that seem to be of no significance. And he said two examples. So the Gemara said, God forbid to say such a thing. Every word in Torah is God's word, it's precise. And we added how the Rebbe would take this to its farthest conclusion, and the Rebbe would cite all the time that the word Torah comes from Lashon Hara. The word Torah, literally translated, means instruction. Torah comes from the term Hara, which is also the same root word as Mora. Like Mora, an instructor. So Hara is instruction. And Torah also comes from the same terminology, instruction. And that's the would insist that every single, based on this kind of idea represented the Gemara here, that every single part of Torah is an instruction. And therefore it's a person's obligation to not just understand the Torah in its abstract, but also to find application. And they would do this class all the time. It would explain some deep concept in halacha that seems to be unrelated to nowadays, because there was halacha about something in the temple, and then they would find at the end an instruction for every Jew to be able to follow. Like as with stories of Torah, a complex discussion about the story in Torah, they would conclude with an instruction. Every time they would explain to Rashi, a commentary of Rashi on the Torah, they would explain it, explaining every single word, and they would conclude with Yain Shel Torah. Rashi is the wine of Torah, and it's what's the instruction for every Jew. So it's modeled in this Gemara. So Menashe specifically raised two examples of the Torah which seem to be insignificant. The Gemara is now going to address them and discuss why they are significant and how we can actually learn an instruction from those passages in the Torah. Okay, it would be interesting to see why he picked these two. I mean, there are other examples of parts of the Torah that a person has to work a little harder to find the instruction, but he chose these two, and that's what the Gemara is going to discuss. So the Asan Alamiyah, since we arrived at it, what is it about? In other words, since Menashe raised the issue of these two passages in the Torah being seemingly insignificant, and the Gemara is telling us that they are significant, so please tell us, what's the significance? So the first verse that Menashe raised that seemed to be significant was Achais Loiton Timna. And the sister of Loiton is Timna. It's the verse is discussing the context of the verse is discussing the chronology of the world getting to Avram Avinu, getting to Noach, and then
this is with the wives of Esau and his sons.
Oh, this is later. So I'm trying to figure out why he's picking this and why not the whole thing. Why is it important to tell us who Esau's children are?
No,
let's just assume that it is.
The Esau's children, you talked about the genealogy was mentioned and so on. But the
question is who his wife's sister of who?
Well, why mention that Tina was only a concubine? Also, why mention her brother? That's like more removed from
the pasuk is going through the genealogy of Esau. That's true, but the question is why it becomes. Yeah, I guess. So, okay, let's just see what the Gemara says.
The wives are mentioned, but why particularly mention this one only Pelegish, and also why mention her brother is even like more removed from the top,
from the direct genealogy.
Yeah, that's his objection.
In other words, he accepts that the rest of the genealogy is important, and that itself, why?
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, so let's see. Why is it important to tell us that Achais Leiton Timna, that the sister of Leiton is Timna? So says the Gemara, Mahi. What's this about? So says the Gemara, Timna Bas Malachim. Timna was a princess. She was the daughter of noblemen, of kings. The Ksiv, as the verse reads earlier, right? Nope.
It's actually a little bit later.
It's a little later.
But the same portion.
Yeah. Aluf Loitan, Aluf Timna. The chieftains of the clan of Loitan and the chieftains of the clan of Timna. So we had the name Timna appearing as a chieftain in a clan. Now, B'chol Aluf, whenever the verse says Aluf, which is a chieftain, Malchusa B'loi Taga. It's a king without a crown. We say they were kings, but they lacked, I don't know, like in terms of like the political position of a king without a crown, I'm not sure what it means, but it could mean something to the effect of they led a tribe, but they didn't have the traditional system of monarchy where, let's say, not necessarily did their children become the next king, but they, at least for while they were there, they served as leaders of this clan.
They might have been appointed rather than designated as an heir.
Yeah. Either they were appointed by the people or they just fought their way to the top. Like, one who proved themselves to be the strongest protector.
Like
became,
in general, yes. Like
yeah.
he was aloof today. Yeah.
Aluf, that's right. The word today, aluf, would mean general.
General, yeah.
But in the Torah, it means like chieftain or like a leader of the clan. Okay, so it's a king without a crown. So Boili Gurde, Timna, wanted to convert. She wanted to join this new tribe of monotheistic people, led by Avram. So Basa Eitzel Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. She came to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Does that mean she went to all three of them individually? First to Avram, then to Yitzchak, then to Yaakov? Or does it mean she went to the people of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? I'm not sure. Either way.
Probably not covering.
Probably the latter.
Yeah, because Avram may not have been alive already, because Asa was only 15.
Asa was very young when Avram died, that's right.
Yeah, they're talking about his children.
Yeah, Avram died before he leaves the fold. And especially if she's trying to come to Judaism. Yes, it's probably after. So it means the clan of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov probably more likely. And V'lekabluah, but they didn't accept her. They rejected her desire for conversion. Halcha, she went off. V'yisi pilegesh la'lifaz ben Esav, and she became a concubine to Eliphaz, son of Esav. Amra, she said to herself, Mutav, better to hey shivchal umazu. It's best to be a maidservant, like a second-rate wife, to this nation, even though it's a negative branch of that nation. It's Esav's son, Eliphaz. But better to be connected in some backward way to that nation, rather than be a noblewoman. It's some other nation. No, she was the daughter of chieftains, so she could have been a noblewoman in some other clan. In the clan of Timna or the clan of Loitan, whichever clan it would have been. But she decided better be a second-rate woman to the clan of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov than be a first-rate woman in the clan of some other nation. So Nofak Minei, the result was that out of her, there came many generations later Amalek, the people of Amalek.
So Pharaoh's daughter also was.
That's right. Hagar is the same story.
Hagar
is the same story. But she was accepted. She was brought in. She was a daughter of the king of Egypt, and so that
his idea, right? It's his idea.
he said, rather my daughter be a maid by Avram, because he saw the miracles of Avram, rather than be a princess in my thing. But he was a king with a crown, right? Rather than the kings without a crown, like these clans. So later generations, out of this Timnah comes Amalek.
Actually, direct generation, right?
Sorry?
Amalek is the grandson of Esau, so right from this relation.
The person Amalek, but we're specifically speaking of the nation of Amalek that comes later. The person of Amalek comes from her, right? But the point is the nation of Amalek descends from her. The Tzarinu Yisrael, which later caused much trouble for the Jewish people. As we all know, Amalek was the first one to have the audacity to attack the Jews after all the great miracles of leaving Egypt in the desert. So my taima, what's the reason? What's the reason that this had to happen? Why it happened this way? That she was rejected, and then from her comes Amalek. Specifically from her comes Amalek. Says the Gemara, They should have not rejected her. And there's the lesson. That's what the Gemara is telling us. There's a lesson. Rather than when your potential enemies are coming to join you, don't reject them, because they will come back to haunt you later. That's the simple reading of this thing. But we can go a little deeper here and take it in its Kabbalistic level, and then it has a lesson not just on a national level. That on a national level, as Jewish people, we shouldn't reject the hands of those who want to work with us. But even on a personal level, we can take this if we take the Kabbalistic route. And the reason why I'm... well, first of all, I mean, any Gemara, if you can take the Kabbalistic route with it, but specifically with this one, because the Gemara talked about the king without a crown. And the king without a crown is a Kabbalistic idea. Now, you may remember when we learned in Tanya and Shabbos afternoon, we didn't really talk about it so much, but when the Alter Rebbe introduced at the beginning of chapter 6, when the Alter Rebbe introduced the animal soul, and that the animal soul has 10 attributes just like the godly soul does. So over there it was referred to as Eser Kisr de Misavusa, the 10 negative crowns. Why that is a good question. So what I'm getting at is that a king, right, refers to what usually we call actually Malchus, but Malchus without Keser, right? So we usually Keser Malchus, the lowest attribute is connected to the highest attribute, the highest being Keser, the lowest being Malchus, and that's the proper way it should be done. Where Malchus, the lowest of attributes, should have the highest of attributes attached with it, which is Keser. In simpler language, that would be Malchus is a person's capacity to, in a person's experience, Malchus is a person's capacity to communicate. Now, the proper way a person should communicate is if it's connected to Keser, the highest thing. Keser is my desire. It means what I communicate should be infused with how I really feel, who I really am. Right? So a king without a crown, in this context would mean that which I am projecting, but I don't really want to project. That's Klippa. Right? Klippa is that which Hashem is infusing divine energy into certain elements of this world, but God, so to speak, doesn't really want to be there. His Keser is not there. His true desire is not there. God's creating it because you need free choice, and because we need free choice, therefore if they have negative elements, that's not really wants to be. It's only a means to an end. So it's Malchus, it's being created, but it's Beloy Taga, it's lacking a crown, it's lacking God's desire, as it were, to be invested in there. It's what's called in Chassidus Chitzonis, Haratzin, external will, or Acharayim, the backside of God's desire. We talked about this, the 3 levels of desire. In wanting something, I want the thing itself, I want the things that lead up to those things, and then I like tax bills that I have to pay in order to keep the thing functioning. That's Klippa. So she's an element of Klippa. She comes from the negative side. It's a king without a crown. It's a king in that God's creating it, but it's lacking the crown. It's not really where God wants to be. God wants to be giving life to Judaism, Torah, mitzvahs, and godliness. Now, as we learn, there are different levels of Klippa. There's some levels of Klippa that are supposed Noga, which is the kind of Klippa which is supposed to be elevated, which is most of our world, which in and of itself is neither good nor bad, but at the moment doesn't express godliness, but it has the potential to express godliness. This physical table, when you buy the table, it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell you anything about God, and it doesn't tell you anything about anti-God. But if we take the table and we study Torah on it, now we've taken it out of a state of Klippa, Klippas Noiga, and we've elevated it to Kedusha, we've elevated it to holiness, because now this table becomes a vehicle for us to learn Torah, and the same thing is true of most of this world. It's one level of Klippa. So that's the level of Klippa that one has to engage and elevate. But then there's a level of Klippa which is to be rejected completely, known as Sholish Klippos Atmes, the 3 levels, the 3 lower level of Klippas that to be rejected. And that is all non-kosher food and non-kosher behavior. They're not to be they're to be rejected and not to be engaged. Now you'll also remember from this past week in Tanya, in our Tanya class, that the way in which the lower level of Klippa gets its life force, right, everything that exists has to have divine energy in it, which means it has to come from holiness. But the holiness has to be diminished to the point where you don't even recognize it anymore. Right? So as the divine energy gets slowly diminished, you go through lower and lower worlds where godliness is less and less obvious, and you finally come to this physical world where godliness is not obvious, but the table has potential for elevation. And then you get to an even lower state where godliness is so concealed that you can't even elevate it. Non-kosher food and non-kosher behavior. And you'll remember that the middle level, the level of klipas naya, the level of klipa, which conceals godliness but has the potential to be elevated, is the intermediary between holiness and the lower level of klipa that's completely rejected, which is why this table can go both directions. Either, like right now, we're using it for the study of Torah, it gets elevated, or if God forbid we were to use it for sin, it would descend. So what happens if you don't accept it and you reject it? It goes to a lower level and becomes the negative klippa. This is what happens to her. She is a woman that could have been converted, could have been incorporated and absorbed in holiness. But instead she was rejected. And where'd she end up going because she was rejected? To the level of klippa of Amalek, which is to be completely destroyed. Amalek is to be completely destroyed. That's the halacha, right? So if there's ever a prototype of klippa, of the kind of klippa that has to be rejected, the kind of non-holiness that's to be rejected, Amalek is that kind of holiness. So here she was at one opportunity, she couldn't have been incorporated. She was a kind of klippa that had the potential to be elevated to godliness, and she came asking for it. But because she was rejected, she didn't just remain at that level of klippa, went even lower. She went to a Amalek level, she went to a point where it has to be completely rejected. And we're... Sorry?
Conversion, Rambam holds that even a Amalek can convert and they're accepted. It's
only at a certain point.
Yeah. So there's always the element of redemption, right, even when it's...
And here's another interesting part. What does she do to become Klippas Amalek? Who does she marry? She marries Esav's son. And why does she do that? Rather be second rate to this nation than first rate to another nation. Which means Klippa itself also siphons from holiness. But if it's not going to get its sustenance in a direct way, it's going to get sustenance in an indirect way. And if it gets in an indirect way, that's when it becomes Klippa. In other words, a Jew has the capacity to, the Jew, with his Kedusha, can bring divine life force into the entire world around him. If he engages the world around him in a positive way, then he brings life force in a positive way. We use this table for Torah study, so we're bringing positive divine energy into this table. But if we behaved inappropriately, we were behaving like Esav, right? Yaakov and Esav are the two parts of our neshama. Or the two neshamas we have, Yaakov our godly soul and Esav our negative, our animal soul. So if we engage in the world around us through Yaakov, through our godly soul, then that klippa gets elevated. If we engage in the world around us with our Esav, with our animal soul, then we're still a vehicle to give energy to that element of the world, but we've made it descend. So she becomes Amalek precisely by siphoning off the Jew, but in a bad way. Following?
But also we kind of pushed her as well. That's the irony. We're partly responsible as well.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Everything comes down to the way the Jew interacts with the world around him. Either in a positive way and therefore it's elevated, or in a negative way and you make it get worse.
The irony, Eliphaz is actually the best of Esav's sons because he spared Yaakov when he met him on the way.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because there was potential there, but it didn't realize.
But on a Peshat level, it's very unfair. Because here she's trying to tap into... She's saying, I'd rather be, even in a very indirect way, part of this tribe through Yitzchak, who's the father of Esav, right?
Yeah.
At least I'd rather be there than
somewhere else.
Than involved with these other, at least I have a taste of some yichus that's good. Right. And from her comes Amalek. It's like, so she herself, you asked her, and you would have said, but if you do that, you're going to have, she would have said, then I'm trying to tap into the virtuous part of it.
So let's use it this way.
It's very unfair.
Klippa let's put it this way. Klippa, let's put it in the context of the Klippa thing we're talking about. Klippa would say, I'd rather a Jew get a Jew to do a tiny little avera than me being in charge of a whole nation misbehaving. It's more valuable to Klippa that I get a tiny little bit of Kedusha energy from a Jew doing a little avera rather than getting a whole nation to do terrible things. This is more worth it. And that is where we end up feeding into Klippa to make it even worse.
That's why we take in converts.
Sorry?
That's why we take in converts.
We take in converts because we're supposed to take in converts.
You're supposed to take her in too.
We're supposed to, right? I'm saying in the personal sense, if we're going to take it to the Kabbalistic personal sense, then the idea is the world around us is waiting for us to elevate it. And if we don't elevate it, we're rejecting it, we make it worse.
Yeah, also, she was spurned. And that's what commentators say. She took her hatred and transferred it to her son. Because she was spurned, like the famous line of Shakespeare, "How's no first woman who's been spurned."
She let out her.
She let out on her child, and then also the reason that we suffer because if we we caused it, because if she would have taken her in, it would have been different. But we rejected her, so we're also responsible. Then it makes it even worse. What does a Malek thrive on? When we reject Hashem, so if we reject Hashem, then Hashem does make it take someone rejected from us, and He rejects us. So it's like cascading set of that you look at it from that point of view.
Snowball effect.
Yeah. So this
it's not only snowball, but it's cascading. It ricochets.
No, this is
ricochets back and forth.
Yeah.
So all the players are like.
This is like that's a shot way of putting. In other words, the Kabbalah I just described is like a stack on top of what you just said. They both follow.
They don't contradict. I was playing more like in a ricochet, things bounce off. One
right.
bounce
So
off
as
the other.
the Jew is the conduit for divinity in this world, and the question becomes: does he use it appropriately and thus elevate everything, or use it inappropriately, thus making things worse?
The same story with Yeshua Notzri. The same story.
That's correct. The Gemara makes a very similar story.
Same idea.
He was rejected by his teacher, and that's what happened.
Small, you have to draw with the right hand and push off with the left, because sometimes you push off too strongly, and the repercussions like we mentioned that those sparks are, which could have been used for Judaism, are now used elsewhere. The energy is misdirected, and it's against us. That's the irony.
And that misdirected energy is siphoned from you.
Yeah, exactly.
From this woman saying, "I want to marry Elisa."
And directed against.
Taken from you, and that's correct.
Redirected. So it's again the ricochet effect. If you shoot them both, and it bounces.
It just shows us how the Sidra Achra, the whole idea, that other side, the whole idea of Bereira, of having the choice at the very moment, that each instant should be so conscious and mindful of what we're doing, soulful, I would say. We don't use enough the word souling rather than thinking. Really, to enter our to enter the purity of our soul, to that moment of choice we could have had. And it just shows that on one hand, we are here because of the merit of our ancestors, but on the other hand, we are approaching Mashiach Satan. Because if in fact there would have been a Chabad type ideology, and I don't say this like this, the Chabad type ideology at that time, a type of Rav Schneerson idea of being able to, on the one hand, you push someone a little bit aside and say you're doing, but on the other hand, having the embrace, then it would have been a very different situation. So on the one hand, yes, our ancestors, but on the other hand, we're approaching Mashiach Satan because our entire being is being purified more and more to that which it should be. No, not purified. It's being, the ashes are coming off.
These are the prototypes. The prototype is
exactly.
The prototype here is.
So the message here is how to ensure that with God's help.
And here's another interesting element, which is
the moment that we have that conscious that we recognize. God forbid that the choice we take of the moment doesn't.
And here's the prototype here is that the world around us actually is like this woman Timnah is begging to be elevated. That's what it wants. That's why it was created. It was created for us to elevate. It's waiting for us, right? It's not like the world around us is the enemy. The world around us, even the enemy. But rephrase that. The enemy is created because we didn't engage in the world that we were supposed to. In other words, the world around us wants to join, wants to be part of the divine mission, and if it's not, it's because we rejected it. If it's anti the divine mission of making this world more holy, it's because we rejected it, and it's siphoning off our energy against us. Right? Not to see the world as the enemy that we have to run away from, but rather as the means and the people and the items that want to be elevated and want to be part of the mission.
To take a little example of recent history, if it wouldn't have been for that one family with Putin that was able to give him basically a home when his parents didn't give him a home, we wouldn't have the way that he acts with Jews today.
Yeah, that's on a national scale. So even on
an extreme. How on an individual basis we should realize what every action of ours.
Even on an individual basis, meaning eating, using the food that you have in front of you. The food in front of you has divine energy in it. That divine energy would like to be incorporated in your divine energy. And the question is, in what way is that going to be? Eating for the sake of serving Hashem, then that divine energy in that piece of meat and that piece of bread has been elevated and absorbed in holiness. And if not, it gets pushed down to the lower level.
And as a result, every machshava, dibur, maaseh, every thought,
that's correct.
That we exemplify in front of other people, God forbid we shouldn't, anything that we ever do in any way, think or bring forward, that has to have a holy purpose.
Yeah. Okay, let's finish the Gemara here, the last two lines here. So the other line from the verse that Menashe poked fun of and saying that it seems to be irrelevant is Vayelech Reuven b'mei ketzir chitim. It's the story of Reuven. When Reuven goes out to the field, he comes back home with flowers, and he does a whole trick to get his father to be with his mother rather than one of the other wives. Anyway, so Menashe is saying that the description of where Reuven is at what time and where he is seems to be relevant. The point is he came home and he convinced his father to go the other way. Why the rest of the story where he's in the field and he's at the time when the harvest is and he collects these flowers, it seems the story could have been said without it. So where's the lesson there? So it says the Gemara Amar of Rav Bar Yitzchak. Rav Bar Yitzchak says Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, Mikan, from here, L'tzadikim, to the right, is a lesson to the righteous, to the Jewish people. She'ein poishin yedem begezel, that they should not extend their hand into that which is not theirs, into thievery. So even though it's at the time of collecting the harvest, which means there's plenty of wheat available, and wheat seemingly is more abundant and probably more valuable than the dudayim, the flowers he brings home, and he could have easily just taken 2 or 3 stalks of wheat. And
they could have gotten the flowers in someone's field. Nevertheless, he didn't go to the field. He went to the Hefker field. That's why.
Right. He could have gone. That's what I'm saying. He could have gone and taken wheat, which belonged to people. Right. It would have been more valuable, and the owner of whoever owned that wheat would have barely noticed.
Maybe back on the flowers. He couldn't have the flowers also in someone's field. We didn't do that. We went to the Hefker field. Because he said it has to be some kind of...
Either way, the Yimtzid Yadayim, and therefore instead of taking from the flower, instead of taking from the wheat that belongs to people, he went to go find flowers. So the verse is telling us what was available and what he chose to take regardless of what was available. Even though there's plenty of wheat available belonging to people, he didn't take it and ended up taking these flowers that were ownerless. And that's why the verse tells us this part of the story, even though it seems irrelevant to the rest of the the narrative. The Gemara concludes, "My Dudayim." What are Dudayim? That's the name of the flower that the verse describes. What is it? Right? If you into Dudayim Besada, he finds Dudayim, he finds these flowers Besada in the field, as opposed to in the place where the wheat is growing, which is where people would own it. So as Gemara asks, "My Dudayim, what are Dudayim?" So 3 options for what Dudayim are. If you can tell me what they are, good for you. Amar Rav says, Yerivruchi. Levi says, Levi Omar, Sigali. Abirnis Omar, Sibiski. I think Sigili is violet, but the other 2 I'm not sure.
Probably don't even exist today.
Sorry?
They probably don't even exist today.
With the Stein salts?
He says violet on one of them, but Rashi says that the other 2 are grass based. They have grass roots, and they're kind of a spice.
No, he's translating English.
Some kind of smell.
Mandrakes.
What had it translated in English?
Mandrakes.
Oh, yeah.
What's that? Steinfeld just puts violet. It doesn't mention the other 2.
I don't really know what it is.
What is it?
Like a passion.
It's an aphrodisiac. It's supposed to.
It's an aphrodisiac.
It's supposed to increase the desire for relations. That's why he brought it for his mother.
Okay. All right. We'll stop over here tomorrow, God willing. Some very beautiful statements about the power of learning Torah and the proper way to learn Torah and the proper way to teach Torah. All that coming tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, everybody.